You're listening to Releasing Trauma, a survivor's podcast. And now here's your host, Tracy Osborne. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we are talking about ballet, polio, and paralysis. And I'm sure you're going, how in the world are we going to do that? Well, with me today is Agota Gabor, and she is going to tell us her story about how she went from ballet to polio to paralysis. So, Aggie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Let's start about your life. You ballet was your life. You studied at the Hungarian Opera House, and then
bang,
everything.
Yeah, so I was born in Budapest, in Hungary, and from age 5 or so on, I started studying ballet, and then around age 6 or 7, I can't remember, 7, I think, I passed the audition to get into the ballet school of the Hungarian Opera House. In Europe, everywhere really, most operas has their own ballet school. And to get in is pretty difficult. Like, I think there are about 30,000 kids auditioning and about 30 get in. So it's quite good. They're looking for a lot of things: your build, your flexibility, your potential. When you're a good dancer, you can tell pretty quickly who has the potential and who doesn't. So I was lucky, or the right kind of build, the right person, and I got in. And it was a fascinating, fantastic experience. It wasn't just like you go to ballet school and take lessons. You actually live it. We took our lessons at the opera house in the big rehearsal hall and a small one, depending on what we were doing, and started at 8 o'clock in the morning. First, you had an hour and a half class. Then you had a short break. Then you went to the rehearsal, learning all the little bits and pieces that children do in ballet, which is quite a bit. And you also the backdrop to operas, so you have to learn about operas and what you have to do. Sometimes you just stand in the church, like I remember in Cavaliera Rusticana, you just stand in the church while all the drama behind you is going on. And then there is, of course, my big deal was the Nutcracker, because I got to do the pas de trois 64 times, and it was on Pointe, and it was only given to very talented kids. And so your whole life, your playground is the opera. You live it. You love dance. You already picked out your favorite future roles, whether it's going to be, are you going to like doing the second act of Swan Lake when it's Odette, or will you be better as the Black Swan, Odelia? And so your whole life is wrapped around it. And that's how I lived until I was 15. And then it was under a communist dictatorship at the time, Hungary was. And there was an epidemic, but unlike in the United States, where kids were sent to the country when the polio epidemic was on, the communist regime did not want to publicize it. It's like a little bit of the anti-vaxxers here who don't want to know. Oh, shut up. Kind of thing. Yeah, you can bring a little bit of a parallel. But anyway, one day I got very ill. I got a terrible headache, so bad. I was doing a summer job. I was modeling, actually, for a magazine. And my mom came to pick me up, and I could hardly walk home. It was just a horrific headache. And she put me to bed and tried to cook my favorite foods to make me better. Nothing made me better, so we had to call the doctor. And I was diagnosed with polio. Infantile paralysis was the name of it. The correct name, but it's polio. And the next morning, they took me to the hospital. It was terribly scary because at the time in Hungary, any contagious infectious disease in the hospital complex, the building was separate from the other buildings, and it had a black flag on top, like you thought you had plague or something. It was horrible, very, very scary.
I can imagine.
And it was.
Especially as a child.
Exactly. And so they took me in there, and the next few days are kind of in a fog because I was very, very ill. I don't know if you want me to describe it, but how polio, the virus, actually works. The doctors stand around you and they cannot do anything to stop it, but they actually know by asking you to move your arm or your leg or breathe, asking you those things and see what you can and cannot do. They can see how the virus moves through your body. So, for example, if the virus goes into your arm, it goes, doesn't stop, your arm probably won't be paralyzed. So like with me, it stopped at my thumb. So this is my left hand, I can do this. On my right hand, I can't because it stopped right here. So this nerve and this muscle was paralyzed. But the doctors watched this. And as it goes through your body, if it goes to your lung, you can't breathe. So they would put you into the iron lung, which is a horrific thing. I was next to the iron lung. I think they put me in for about a half an hour, but I was very lucky. It went away from it. But if it goes on your heart, you die. So that's how they can watch it. And then once it stops, it has done its harm. And then they put you into a ward, and they give you an enema because, of course, your innards also can get paralyzed. So they want to make sure there's no problem.
Sure.
And then you go to sleep. And I woke up, and there were all these girls, and they started talking about wheelchairs and how we're going to be able to maybe wheel ourselves around. And I started losing it, saying, what are you talking about? I'm going back to ballet in September. This was like in July, in the summer. And then one girl started kind of laughing and saying, yeah, try walking. And I tried to get out of bed. And of course I couldn't, and I collapsed. And that's when I lost it. I just lost it. I started screaming and hysterical. I just couldn't cope. And they took me away. And the next time I woke up, I was in a private room. Obviously, they gave me some shots or something.
Sure.
And they kept me in the private room for a long time because I just couldn't cope with it. I couldn't cope with what was ahead of me. So I had a very nice doctor, and he said, oh, don't worry. If you work hard on physio, you can cope with it. And so I was in the hospital for a couple of months, and nobody could come see us. It's a bit like COVID again, because we were in behind a cage kind of thing. My mom could come to the window. Every morning she could come, but I would just touch her through the window. And it was scary. And the whole idea of what if it won't work? We didn't know what's happening. So by the time they let me out of the hospital, I could walk with a walker. And I went home. And then for a year, I went to physio, which was pretty gruesome. And it was at the PETO, PETO, which is still an internationally famous institute for children, paralyzed or hurt by neurological, whether it's MS or multiple sclerosis or polio. So it was a specialized place. He was a very scary man. And he, other than the traditional physio, like water therapy and therapy, he also had this, you can do it, whether you believe it or not, it's psychological, it's in your head. If you think you can walk up those steps, do it. And if you fall, it's okay. And I'm not going to help you. And he was very scary. So part of it is, and it stayed with me all my life, is you have to just try that much more. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so we went through that. Then I went back to dance, because dance, of course, is fantastic exercise. And my old school at the opera allowed me to go back. And that was very difficult. That was as difficult as learning polio, because I could do some because I was better. Mm-hmm. But I had to, the whole idea was that's where I had to learn to cope with the fact that I will never, ever be as good. Like I might be able to walk. I might even, as I did, able to dance, but I'll never be that ballerina.
Back to who you, yeah.
Not my dream. So that's how it happened. But I was very lucky, very fortunate, and that I had an active life. I mean, actually, right after that came the Hungarian Revolution of the 50s. You may have read about it. You're too young to have been there. but the revolution came, and my mother and I immigrated to Canada. And then in Canada, I actually went back to dancing, but not ballet. I could never do ballet again. But I put myself through school, journalism school, and by dancing at night in Montreal as a chorus girl in reviews. It was very, very sexy and glamorous, wonderful. It was like Las Vegas now at the time. So that was fun. And so I got over it and I became a journalist and everything was okay. And about 40 years later, about 10, 15 years ago, all of a sudden I started getting weak again and having problems walking up the stairs. And people said, oh, well, you're getting older. You know, people get old and they have difficulty walking. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Only my right leg is getting older. My left isn't. How do I make that up? Little things. But I mean, you know, I was in 60. So I thought, yeah, sure, I am getting long in the tooth. But anyway, so you go to the doctor, and that was kind of a shock because very few of them even knew what we were talking about. They kept saying, well, you got old. Maybe your right leg is getting a little bad, or arthritis, you know, the usual cliche stuff, and just know how it all. And you do try to do research, and it's frustrating as any. In Toronto, where, well, I lived in the Far East for a while and then in Europe, back in Europe, but mostly my home is in Toronto. And I found one doctor, because you see, post-polio syndrome, which is what we found out later is what I have now, is only apparent with older people, because then the vaccine came. A year after I got polio, the polio vaccine came. So in the Western world, there are no young polio survivors. There got to be, at least they got to have been born after 1956. So they're not young people. And so there was very little research, and even today, no research put into trying to figure out what to do. And so what happens with post-polio syndrome is the same muscles that were attacked by the virus initially. What happened is the other muscles connected to that particular nerve group took over the work, and they started working overtime. And so in 30, 40 years, they said, enough is enough, I'm tired. And that's how you get post-polio syndrome. And it's very difficult because, you went through it once. So it's like a trauma phase number 2, because you realize I fought so hard and I got over it once and I made a life, and here we go again. This bloody virus got me.
Were you able to get over it again, or is it something that you've just had to adapt to now?
It's now I'm fighting it, and it's very difficult because that overworked muscle idea, if you exercise too much, you tire those muscles and maybe kill them. So you're making it worse. But if you don't exercise at all, then you are into use it or lose it. So I exercise. I am suffering from it now and coping with it every day, trying different things. Pilates, yoga, swimming is very good. Biking is good. When I now walk, if I walk more than a block, I use a cane just to ease that right leg. And I know it's not, like I cannot conquer it again, I don't think.
Wow.
I just have to live with it, and you kind of learn.
So how does that affect your mental health? Going from you fought it, you beat it, you've had a very active life, and then bam, it's back. How did that affect your mental health?
Well, it is a very difficult thing to cope with, especially if you were always so active. I mean, I made a living as a dancer.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now it's difficult to walk from here to there. It's horrible. It's like an incurable disease. Like, the first time around, there was hope for me because I was lucky. I mean, there were people that stayed in a wheelchair. I was fortunate, thank God. But I had hope. If I just work hard. I didn't know about overwork. So if you survive polio, you become an A personality because it's so hard. So if you just work hard. But this time, what I find really difficult is I still love to exercise. Just all my life was movement. And for me now to be told, hold it, put the brakes on because you're hurting yourself, it's suffering every day. It's very hard, very, very hard. In fact, during COVID, when we didn't have that much to do, I actually hurt myself because I over-exercised. There was nothing to do, so I would just work out. It's very hard. Trauma is not something that ever goes away. And it's a double whammy. You remember the first time, and how does this differ? This is not as sharp pain. This is a dull, ongoing, I gotta live with it.
And it's just something that you have to learn to live with.
Yeah. And I'll have to, but I will.
Well, I'm sure you will, because I can tell just from talking with you that you have a very strong, stubborn mindset.
Yeah. I think maybe
I am not going to let this get me.
Oh, and part of it is polio. Whenever you have a trauma, that tends to form you too, and shape you the way you are. You have to get over it so you become strong.
Well, not only that, but being a ballerina, just from what I've seen and what I've heard, it's such discipline, rigid discipline. And, you work until your feet bleed and then you work some more. And so you have that mindset that, okay, I'm just going to power through the pain because that's what I've done my whole life.
Yeah, that's true. And you put that plus getting over polio in the first time, which was also very difficult. Put that together and you're going to get a stubborn girl, a stubborn person. And and that's what I don't know. You read my book?
I have not read your book yet, but I was going to ask you about it. Forever on Pointe.
Yeah, Forever on Pointe. And it kind of describes how many times you have to reinvent your life to when you're hit by something like that. First your dream is polio. Ballet. Then polio kicks you, then you have to have another dream. Right. What am I going to do? So it became television journalism, and then I started a business, and then post polio hits you, and you're not quite ready to not do anything, and you have to do it differently. So it's hard. It's about reinventing yourself more than anything, and dealing with trauma. I hope you can read it.
I absolutely will. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's coming up. They can order it on Amazon as of March 1st. So coming up. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we will make sure that everything, all the links and everything for you and your book and everything are in the show notes for the listeners. If they just go to releasingtraumapodcast.com and pull up your episode, that will all be there for them. So, Aggie, thank you so much.
Take away that it's worthwhile to work hard and not give up and create the kind of life you want to live and enjoy in spite of all the trauma that you may.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful, so inspiring to listen to. How you just kept picking yourself up and not letting it get to you, or not letting it get to you too much.
Right. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you. Listeners, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you give us a like and a follow from whatever app you're listening to, and we will talk to you in the next show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss a show. Be sure to check us out on our new socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.